Hello, Nick.
What's up?
Welcome, everybody. We are going to be doing a recap for all the people who haven't quite listened to all of our last few episodes. We're going to be recapping 33 through 40. Episodes 33 through 40. A lot of good stuff in there. Also, as we always say, this is not a pass.
Right.
To just watch everybody's waiting for the recap. Because we're only going to scratch the surface on each one of these guests, and there's so much good stuff, profound wisdom, great stories, and all of those that you should really get to. Yeah. But how you doing, Nick?
Good. Yeah.
Good. Sweet. Yeah, let's get right into it then. Okay, 33 was our wives episode, Stephanie Roggie and Brielle Kiliansky. What stood out to you in that episode?
Yeah, apparently we let our kids watch too much TV.
Yeah, a lot of screen time debate.
We actually don't. I watched way more TV than my kids growing up, so it's almost laughable thinking about like my kids watching too much TV. Like there wasn't a day that went by in my house growing up where the TV wasn't on. But
really?
Like the TV was on probably every day.
Do you mean like
I would honestly,
like dinner time TV on?
No, just like at least once a day.
No,
like we didn't watch it during dinner, but like I mean, just that the TV was on at some point in the day, every day, evening, like after dinner, before bed, whatever, it doesn't matter. So like, yeah, I'm just a little bit like.
And we all know how you turned out.
Yeah,
so.
I'm a little bit desensitized. And we don't even have TV in my house besides like a streaming thing. Like we'll have like one or two streaming accounts at a time.
And you rotate through them?
Yeah. Like we're the least, like TV is the least of our problems in our house. To me, like that's the idea that we watch too much TV in my house is laughable. Like, compared to what I was used to growing up myself, and like knowing what we currently have compared to like the average American who like pays for cable, or maybe not cable, but like Hulu is like the new cable, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like their Spectrum account, and then they have a Netflix and a Peacock and a Hulu and a ESPN Plus or whatever.
Yeah, it sounds like
we
my
got
house.
None of that. Really? Yeah, we have none of that. We might have one or two at a time, but like yeah, just for like we're budget friendly with that stuff. So yeah, we talked a lot about screen time and how it impacts children, and even delved a little bit into like, could a home function better if there was no screen time whatsoever? But yeah, that was interesting. I think for me, having a little perspective that just because we do less screen time than I think the average family in America, well, I have no idea if that's true. I have no statistics, but I would imagine that we struggle with that a lot less than the average American family. Even if that was the case, like screen time still has an impact on home life and especially child development, and even just like the day-to-day stuff, which I think Stephanie talked about a little bit. Like having too much, screen time for your kids can have a pretty immediate impact, in how to manage that. And like, honestly, yeah, we, again, don't have a ton of screen time at my house, compared to most people, I think. But still, I do notice that stuff too. If we have, it can happen like so fast. Like, yeah, we just talked about what it looks like to monitor screen time for your children. And so I won't go into too much more detail. You can kind of glean some more information from the episode. But that's a good one to listen to if you feel like most families nowadays are like trapped in that cycle of put the kids in front of not most families, a lot of families, put your kids in front of the TV so that you can get your stuff done. Or like maybe you have it's, tell the babysitter, oh, well, I'm gone. Like you can just give them their iPad or put them in front of the TV if that's easiest. Like having just a lifestyle of putting a screen in front of your kids, no matter how much or how little you do that, it has an impact. And that's kind of what we got into a little bit. Just our own personal experience in the episode. No overarching statistics or anything like that, but just kind of what we observed in our kids. Was a big part of that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts on that? Because you made a point in the episode, and I thought it was a good point, that young parents especially kind of overthink things Like the detriment of some things a little bit, maybe too much.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just Nick's opinion, but I think we have a lot of problems to deal with. Like every home has a lot of problems that they have to handle. And kind of like focusing too much on one problem, I think can be a little bit paralyzing. And if you have to make a decision on screen time, like just make it a quick decision. I think in our home, we've spent the better part of our 7 years of parenthood asking the same question, which I think is fine. Like reevaluating and going over things is fine. Like you can make a decision and then you can periodically reevaluate and mix things up and change things. It's no problem. But just like
being too hard on yourself,
being too hard on yourself,
everything.
Yeah, like we love our kids and we spend time with them, and we homeschool, so we spend a lot of time with them. If you think you're ruining your children, if you have that, if that is the case for you too, I don't think that, there's a one issue that's ruining your children. If you're sticking your kids in front of the TV all day long and putting an iPad in front of them all day long, that's problematic no matter how much you love your children, but you're not spending time with them. So,
or how negligent, or how maybe ignorant to the downstream effects of that for sure.
Yeah.
I think in our own home, because I'm married to Stephanie, so I'm here, I can have the same observations she has. When we do have too much screen time, it shows pretty quick. It's like you said. Mm-hmm. It's pretty evident pretty fast.
Yeah.
Like a little bit more pushback or tantrums or whatever. And then this is just our experience. When we cut down on that stuff kind of goes away. It's more room for creativity to go play in the playroom or whatever, and the responses are better. The behavior is better. Yeah, just interesting. Kind of did our own little personal study.
Yeah. I personally, I don't know if we talked about that in the podcast, but I personally don't think it's a bad thing to like force your kids to do things.
Yeah.
I never have an issue saying like, hey boys, put your stuff on and go outside and play. Like I just force them to do it. They don't necessarily need to choose their activities all the time for themselves. There's a lot throughout the day that I tell my kids to go and just, hey, go do this, go do that. Go upstairs and have some playtime. You can turn Odyssey on and play Legos. I don't care. Just go upstairs and have playtime. Put your snow stuff on and go out and play in the snow. We might do that like once a day.
Okay.
These days.
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like they rebound pretty quick if you're not putting them in front of a screen all the time and you are kind of pushing them out of the nest a bit when it comes to like, go do an activity, go do this, go do that.
Yep.
I think they rebound pretty quick. It's all about being intentional. And as one thing that I find encourages, I used to think that my kids like didn't have imagination. Like I struggled with that a lot when they were much younger. They like needed us to force them to do something, which it's ironic because now I'm totally okay with doing that. But back then it frustrated me that I felt like I had to entertain my kids. And that they lacked imagination. But I have found that the older they get, that develops. So imagination like develops. Yeah. They don't just like, I guess they don't just have it when they're 4. Like right. They have a little bit and like through interactive play with them and like you teach them how to have imagination. Right. And nowadays I find my kids choosing their own activities and playing together and coming up with games to play. They don't need my help as much anymore.
Yep.
I think that's just probably, I don't know how much of that comes from me kind of forcing them to go do stuff like go outside and play, go ride your bike. You're going to come with me for a walk. You're going to ride your bike with me, like forcing activity. And over time they like learn how to do things. And that's why they have more imagination now. But coupling that with screen time, if you're going to, force them to watch TV, like just be intentional about, hey, go outside and play now. Like, I don't know. I feel like today we're afraid to tell our kids what to do.
Oh, that's for sure. That is for sure.
You can give them the boot out the house and make them go outside and climb trees. Like you can tell them, you will go outside and you will not come in for an hour. Like you will go play. And like, it's never backfired. It always, like they love it. It's never a bad thing. So I think that if you're intentional, you can work screen time into a healthy home life.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
And that was the debate. I think Brielle was saying like, and a little facetiously that like, let's just get rid of all screen time.
Right.
And I do not think that would be a bad thing. Like that would be a net positive
to get rid of all the screens.
Yeah. Like it would be good. Like the less screen time you have, it seems like the better. Like screens are not necessary to our lives. So she's not wrong in that, but sometimes it's fun. Plain and simple. It's just fun.
You're talking screen time specifically in
like
the form
TV,
of watching shows.
Yeah, like we don't. For us, we don't.
Not like
have,
using a computer for work.
No. Yeah, like TV, like putting your kids in front of a TV. I think for a lot of people, maybe that would even include phones and iPads and video games, which we don't do that. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. For us, it's still just putting on a kid's show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We don't have like we have an iPad that they play chess on, but that's about it. We don't have like the iPad time struggle. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think also when it gets into the debate of developing healthy habits for later in life too, I wonder if there's a correlation there. It's hard to know if a lot of screen time early translates into a lot of screen time when you're on your own.
Yeah,
it's kind of like it's kind of like the whole eating healthy debate too, or cracking down too much on your kids and what does that do to them? But it is proven in many studies. I've got one from UCSF here. For preteens, more screen time is tied to depression and anxiety later in life. And also, I got one from UC Berkeley. Research indicates strong connection between excessive screen time and increased anxiety levels in children and early to late adolescence. So, in some of the causes here, likely to experience anxiety symptoms, particularly among adolescents. This is often attributed to factors like disrupted sleep patterns, social comparison, and exposure to negative content on screens. So, I think like if you monitor some of that stuff, then
I personally think that like a lot of movies can have like movies and shows can be like shows. Our kids watch mostly
Bluey.
I don't know if I would say educational. Like TV can be educational.
Yeah.
So, like again, if you took away all screen time, I don't think that they're missing anything because they're not getting their educational show. That's not anything they can't learn in a book.
Like Miss Rachel.
So, yeah, I've never seen it. So,
so
still, you can take away all screen time. But I think I like that the kids get to watch educational shows, and if you're diligent about what they watch, they actually want to watch that. And we have years of case study of that. Like we never let our kids watch anything that wasn't. There's like I can count the shows that we let our kids watch on two hands. Like I honestly think less than 10 shows we've put on for them. Oh, things like Octonauts and Dino Trucks and
Paw Patrol.
Maybe a couple times, but nothing like long term. Our kids love to watch the same shows that we've let them watch.
Octonauts is pretty educational.
Yeah, it's very educational, and
people are tuning in like these grown men talking about Octonauts.
It's super educational. Yeah, I like Octonauts.
They're like finally some grown men talking about Octonauts.
Yeah,
I like Bluey.
Bluey's
pretty good, but it's not super educational. It's a little bit more.
Bluey's more the life lesson stuff.
Yep.
Octonauts is literal science and like marine biology, and Dino Trucks is another great one. Is like teamwork and building stuff and
problem solving,
teamwork and problem solving. So I think those are great for them to watch. The other night we watched The Land Before Time for the first one.
Okay,
that was rough.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it was so rough. Like that. Like that's another example. Like
rough how?
Oh, it's like so sad. Yeah. Anybody who's seen The Land Before Time, like shout out 90s. It's like it's rough. Like
90s kids.
That one. Yeah, I think that there is value even in like the life lessons. Like we learn about sometimes in movies and shows. Mostly, I would say movies.
Yeah,
kids can learn about things which their parents should be teaching them about, but like to put it into a movie in a consumable format that might be more engaging than me trying to like talk my kid's ear off about grief or whatever. Like a movie, it puts things into an engaging format.
Yeah.
And kids can learn about things like grief and how to deal with grief, and that's a big one. Like The Land Before Time is basically a movie talking about how you can get through grief, with community around you and a common goal. And like I cried. Like this, just like there's no way to get through it without crying.
Public record.
Rocky's like tearing up, but like I feel like as an adult, I remember watching that movie as a kid, and like at 7 years old, I was in tune with like what was going on in the movie, and it was an opportunity to learn, like, oh, life. Like this is like a metaphor in life. I knew that at 7.
Yeah.
I just think that some screen time is good. But again, to my wife's credit, I don't think that she's wrong. You can learn all this stuff in a book.
Right.
And the long-term study, we don't know the long-term ramifications of any amount of screen time.
Yeah.
In the modern format, I would say. I'm sure there are lots of studies, but like
It also
our
talks
consumption is always changing. So do we ever have a long-term study on the current type of consumption? No. So like we don't know. We don't know if we're negatively impacting them.
Yeah.
It's just hard to know.
And the studies do, I mean, it does say excessive. I would like to know how many hours a day that means. I'd have to dive into it a little bit more. But also, what are they watching?
I think
that matters.
Yeah, this becomes more of an issue as they get older, and if they're exposed to things like, if their screen time becomes less of shows and movies and more of social media, like that. I'm assuming that's where the social media and like honestly communication. So like I think a lot of those depression and anxiety statistics are not just about social media. They're about things like, are like texting with friends. How popular am I? How much texting am I doing with my friends versus what they're doing with their friends and yada, yada. Like I think it's like a web. It's a mixed ball that it's really hard. It's like a knot that's hard to get out. Like I think that most of these problems are probably worse the older they get, I would assume.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that my kids are going to be suffering too much in the future from watching a little too much Octonauts and Dino Trucks versus if they were 14, 15, 16 years old, those anxiety and depression symptoms are probably coming from that age group with cell phone usage and social media exposure.
I know for a fact that there's lots of people who put TVs and stuff inside their child's room at a young age.
That I think is a bad idea.
Yep.
That I think if you don't give a kid limits, they will push the limits. That happened to me when I was a kid. My parents got me a TV, a little 13-inch box TV, when I was like 8 or 9, and they said, this is for when you're done with your chores and your homework. And like, it wasn't a week that I was watching it, that I was turning SpongeBob on before my homework was done. And like very quickly I lost the privilege. They took the TV out and I didn't I just think that your kids have to, at that age, your kids should experience these things with
How old were you? 8?
Supervision. Probably. Yeah.
So like you're expecting discipline from a child at 8 years old or younger.
Yeah.
No,
it doesn't.
Not going to happen. And they'll find ways.
Yeah.
They'll find ways to keep it up all night. And
right. Their brain just isn't quite ready to handle that kind of stuff.
I thought that was interesting. It talked about one of the key factors was sleep disruption. That means that they're,
oh, it's terrible.
Blue light emissions, further contribution to anxiety, disrupted bedtime, all of that stuff. So, but we can move on from that. Those are all good points. Check out that episode. It's 33. One last point from 33 though, with the girls was talking about family roles, and what that looks like. Does the father have roles specific? Does the mother have roles specific? And can they mix? Can they mesh in a healthy way? Interesting conversation there.
Yeah.
But so who's next? Let's see. Oh, next, one of my favorites, legacy episode. Why don't you go ahead and introduce that one?
We had Grandpa Roggie on. Might know him as Edward, Eddie, depending on how close you are with him.
I don't know if anybody's ever called him Eddie.
What did his friends call him growing up? I have no idea.
Probably.
So we had Grandpa Roggie on. That would be my grandpa-in-law, your grandfather by birth. One thing, that one we just kind of talked. I think, did you learn anything new in that episode about him? Hockey, right? Was the hockey thing new information for you?
No, what I learned mostly was kind of the severity of I knew what he had gone through with losing a baby. I knew some of that stuff, but never like the details, like the story he talked about when he was in the ambulance.
Right.
Pretty heart hitting stuff.
I
also didn't know that much about his dad, so it would be my great grandpa.
Oh yeah, the one they never got a picture of him. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, he would have died before I was born.
Yep.
So
that one was kind of just like, honestly, kind of rehashing his childhood a little bit, how he grew up, his interests, things that he did, for like more of the lighter side of getting to know your grandfather.
Yeah.
He grew up, in the Mennonite church. And so, and also I think just that generation is he the silent generation, or would that be his dad?
Let me find out.
Well, regardless, like if you can open up your grandparents and get them to talk, usually you'll get some things that you've never heard before
Yeah,
because
he would have been part of the silent
yeah,
generation.
that generation just isn't as vocal, you
Yeah,
know,
they
as
don't-
people are
They
nowadays.
don't complain.
So
They don't
that was just like,
express too much.
yeah. And like it's hard to describe because like we see him all the time. Like we see our your grandparents all the time. So it's not like we don't talk with them, and it's not like anything is a secret. It's not like that at all. It's just there's so much that you don't know about them. It's just interesting.
It's just not talked about.
Yeah. So we got to sit him down and like he, open him up a bit, which wasn't hard. Like he was happy to talk about it, but and get a little bit of the fun side of things. And also we hit on some deep stuff like they had some complications with, having children and whatnot. But I thought it was really neat just to listen to him talk about, playing hockey as a kid, his business ventures, like just the lighter side of things is always, it's nice to talk about that stuff with that generation. Cause I don't think you often get the lighter side of things
Right.
from that age group.
Yeah.
You get like life lessons and wisdoms from grandpa and this and that, but like,
Yeah.
you don't get like what did you do for fun as a kid often? So
Right.
that's what I enjoy most. And even with Mel, like I
Some
just
of
like
those
that
lighter
stuff.
stories of growing up, like in the early 1900s. Even,
Why do the notes
like,
say being run over by a truck?
He got run over by a truck? You don't remember that part?
Well, what was that about?
Oh, we'll clip that. They were working on the farm, and he was on like the bed of the truck and fell over and
Oh, and he was
got
fine,
caught
right?
underneath, and it ran like right all the way up over his shoulder.
But like he was fine.
Said he was sore for a little while.
Okay, so it wasn't like a miracle story. It was like he was just okay. It just happened to be he was okay.
I don't know. I mean,
I can't remember if it was like
it was quick. I mean,
thing
I
or
don't know
not.
how much he was injured. I don't know.
It was one of those
His
things
pain
where, like
tolerance
if it
is
was like a
different.
millimeter to the left, it would have ran him over and it would have been worse kind of thing.
Yeah, and he also said that like the driver knew not to stop.
Oh, that's what it
The
was.
driver knew to
Yeah,
you have
going.
to keep running over him
Yeah.
because if you stop and put all the pressure of the
I remember that
of the
now.
truck on him, it would just crush him.
Yep.
But like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you fell off the middle of the truck off the bed, I think, something like that. The wheel like went like up his leg, up his torso, and like over his
Right over
shoulder.
next
That's
to
not
his
just
head.
like it just grazed him.
Yeah. They were doing that like
I'm assuming they were in a field too, so it probably pushed him down into the ground pretty good.
yeah, right. Yeah.
And he's just like, I was a little sore.
Got back up and kept going.
Like, we didn't go to the hospital back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, different time. That's probably my favorite takeaway of this whole episode, and we got so much good feedback on it. He's just genuine to his core.
Yeah.
And it was really fun to get some insights on him growing up as a little boy.
Yeah.
The way he saw his father was so cool to me. He like a hero, like just he talked about his father having a heart attack and how hard that was on him because he was like, I didn't know that he was like, thought he was invincible. I didn't know that something could happen to him. I didn't know that there was any chink in his armor. So just so cool. And then the way he talked about his father and the way he treated his mother and how that looked and the way he was, teaching his children and raising his children in tough times. We're talking, his father would have been right in the meat of the Depression, right. And had a lot of stress and anxiety. I don't know about anxiety, but a lot of stress and heart issues because of going through that. At least that's what they thought. So,
yeah, there is a story that he tells in there about his father dealing with a guy who tried to get one over on him in the business that they worked in, which you have to tune in to know exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, maybe
Not going to give the whole story.
We can try to clip some of these.
But I thought that was interesting because his father confronted the man about it. And like that kind of confronted the man, was willing to lose business to A, maybe teach this man a lesson for his betterment, and B, well, you can't work with somebody if they're not honest because you can get hurt. And the loss of business is potentially less of a hurt than doing business with them, hoping it goes well and getting screwed because you think you need the money and taking the risk.
Especially in that time,
Yeah.
that day and age.
So like he was willing to lose business, and I just feel like people nowadays aren't confrontational enough to. I thought that was interesting. Like I don't look around at our society and see men willing to do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Like just strong men who are willing to confront evil and wrongdoing when they see it. even at the potential sacrifice to their own well-being. He lost business for a while until that man came back and apologized, which downstream effects. He was right. That man sought forgiveness, so he helped him on a path to healing by confronting him. And B, in the end, ended up getting his business back. So it was fine in the end. But that took courage to step up and confront somebody. And I think we live in a society where we don't confront people
enough
face to face. We do it all over the internet all the time, but we don't confront people like that face to face. And that was a really, really good story, which I think is pretty on theme with a lot of stuff that we talk about. Just being willing to stand up for yourself, and even if sometimes it means having an unpleasant confrontation. Like when he told that story, like the way I pictured his father, I was like, oh, he must have been like a strong dude, just good man, like willing to stand up and
character.
Be honest with people and not shrink from confrontation. We just don't get a lot of that these days. I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I like that story a lot.
Yep, that was a good one. And then, but not only that was that relationship. If you remember the back end of that story, that salesman who had kind of tried to screw him over had lost his wife. Lost a child.
There's always two sides to a story.
And who was the first person he went to? He went and talked to.
That's right.
Somehow he saw something in my great grandpa that he felt like, and they were talking for hours in the barn, and like that is so cool. Yeah. That's some cool stuff.
Yeah, that's a huge part. Yeah, I mean, doing the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable, can have downstream effects that you may not know in the time. But that's one of the many reasons why it's so important for us to behave that way, courageously and doing the right thing. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought that's a really good story. You have to listen to that one.
Yeah. He talked about cherishing your spouse, not taking them for granted. Such an important thing, because on 2 of their 3 pregnancies, he thought he was going to lose my grandma. So he's like, puts into perspective. And the way he tells that story is pretty gut-wrenching, pretty heart-wrenching. So you got to check that episode out. The other thing about his childhood that stood out to me was like they didn't have anything. You know, like they would get a pair of jeans and a fruit for Christmas. And then the way that their dad would make them, like, what do you call them, skipjack?
Yeah, skipjack.
Does that sound right?
I think so.
Out of a barrel.
Yeah.
Like just built them gifts one Christmas, and how much that meant to them. I just think we're missing a lot of that. There's so much materialism. There's so much. We just need to call back to some of the roots of who we are, and a grateful attitude. When I think of my grandparents, and like this is probably the best way you can think of anybody, is just grateful people who are easy to please, and it doesn't take much for them to be satisfied.
Yeah.
Like that is completely countercultural right now. Completely. Everybody's looking for the next thing. Everybody wants more. It's easy to get caught up in that for sure. And that's just not the way they are.
Yeah.
So it's a huge encouragement that you can be that way, but it's also a huge accomplishment. And I think, that's kind of what you want to portray to your next generations. Yeah.
It's even harder nowadays because even if you don't participate, your children will see other people participating in it. And it's harder nowadays. Like, to give parents credit, it is a lot harder nowadays, in my opinion, to try to harken back to that old way of doing things where materialism isn't the most important, because nowadays it's hard to not play Keeping Up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Because you watch your kids see what they're missing out on if you choose to go that way. And that's hard to watch too. Whereas, back then, like, most people didn't have the money. Like, most dads were
everybody was struggling,
making skipjacks for their everybody was struggling.
Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know. I think it's more important than ever, but it's also harder than ever.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Very Little House on the Prairie, though. Like, I remember we read that with our kids a little while ago. Like, that's the kind of stuff that they would get for Christmas. They would get like a new, I don't know, like a new dress or whatever from their mom that she spent all year sewing or whatever. I don't know. And like a bag of grapes and like dice jacks. That like just the simplest stuff, like fruit. Like, they got fruit for Christmas.
Yeah, how do you cultivate a grateful heart?
That's one of the biggest parenting challenges.
Yeah.
How to cultivate a grateful heart.
Yeah, I'd say huge challenge nowadays. Like you just said, we have different challenges nowadays. So
Yeah.
he did have a quote. Oh man, I hope I don't mess it up. But he had a quote and he said, "Good times." Man, I'm gonna have to find it and I'm gonna have to put it in there. Remember, he said something like, "Good times are more harmful than hard times," something to that effect, for character building. Like, yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's because it distracts you from what matters, stuff that distracts you from what matters. Really great episode. I'm so glad I have that on the record forever. I'd love to have him on again. Really with it, like just great conversation. He's 80. He's in his mid 80s, so just a lot of fun. And I know that my dad is going to appreciate that. I love the way that he talked about his dad in that episode. I feel like it's a similar way that I'm going to talk about my dad and how I want my kids to talk about me.
Yeah.
So
that's the goal.
It's pretty much jam-packed of everything that we love.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great man. It's a must listen.
Yep.
Nicest guy on the planet, too.
Episode 34. Episode 34. One last point on a grateful attitude. It really armors you against the world. Like, gratefulness can combat anxiety. Gratefulness can combat stress. Gratefulness can make your whole outlook on life so much better. Something bad happens in your life, glass half full versus glass half empty. I think coming from roots like he did, like it maybe is just part of his nature. Yeah,
it feels second nature to him, maybe. Just didn't have a choice in his life, what era he was born in. His parents' financial situation, like this was all just happened to him, and he was kind of, it's something that you go through. But like for a lot of people, it's not second nature, which is why his story is so important, because you got to learn somewhere.
Yep. What better place than from the people who went through it?
Yep. Not that it was easy for him, like, because sometimes even that's that stuff maybe prepared him for what he went through as an adult. But even those were learning experiences for him, I'm sure too. But yeah.
Yep. Must listen to.
Yeah. Things are different. So gotta heed those words of wisdom while they're still around.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that message will be around for
ever,
as long as the internet's a thing. Moving on, episode 35. Kalani, Zehr we had on. That was a fun time.
That was our sports casting episode.
That's
pretty much all we talked about.
Yeah.
So if you like sports, listen to this one. Next.
Yep. We highlighted a lot of his journey, college athletics, high school athletics, and specifically in football and baseball. I thought it was really interesting talking about when he was playing football in college, how they would just like make him eat because he's a big guy.
Yeah.
So like once he was made a lineman or whatever it was, they were like, eat. Yeah. And how unhealthy that was for him.
Super unhealthy.
And for his eating habits. And yeah, you shouldn't be forcing guys. I was just talking to somebody last weekend at the football, Ethan Martin, at the football game, the Super Bowl. Shout out, Eagles, smoke the Chiefs. And he was talking about a documentary he watched of D1 college football athletes and like how much they had to eat and how like disgusting it is. Yeah. Basically, like put a bucket next to you and keep eating.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand it. Just because they need to put on weight.
Right.
So that they can be harder to move around.
Yeah. I'll never forget when I learned like, oh, you have to eat to get big. Like our scrawny high school quarterback when I was in 9th grade was eating a PB&J in the locker room. And it was like, that was, he was trying to get food in, like, to gain weight for football. And I was like, oh, like you have to eat extra to like get big. And it was just like a PB&J. For him, that's all it took was a PB&J. Right. But like what like these guys have to eat at the higher levels.
I can't imagine.
And also, yeah, like there are people in the NFL that like lose weight right after they retire. Like guys like, what was the famous Browns offensive lineman, Joe Thomas?
Okay.
Hall of Fame offensive lineman, spent his career in Cleveland, and he retired after like 15 years or whatever. This guy's like 6'6", 350 his whole career.
Whoa.
And now he's like, 6'6", didn't get any shorter, but like 250, like just jacked, like lost all the weight, super healthy. But like, that's like You don't like that's like one person of how many people who like maybe leave with like a lifetime of food struggle. Like it seems super unhealthy to me. Yeah. Like you hear about the one guy that did it and like maybe another guy will do it, but like there's so many that, especially in football, like that's like an eating disorder.
Dude, check this out. Okay.
Creates like a lot of struggle with, I don't know. It just seems very,
later in your life.
Very unhealthy. Yeah.
Okay. This is an article from Food and Wine. I don't know. Okay.
Ooh, fancy.
I don't know why that's that. The article says
food and drink.
No, Food and Wine.
Food and wine.
Okay. It says universities spend millions of dollars annually to fuel their football players. Here's how it all comes together. The athletes who consume as much as 9,000 calories per day need to eat for performance, and it takes dedicated team dietitians, chefs, and administrators. Yeah, what are the dietitians saying?
Yeah.
It's a lot of chicken.
Yeah, I feel like I would like to say that nowadays they have, like, technology and sports science and sports nutrition and technology has gotten so advanced that you would think that there would be better ways to do it. But, like, think about it for a sec. The fact of the matter is that the one thing, like, it's calories in, calories out, and you've only got them for 2 or 3 years, that will probably never change.
Well, like, also, like,
they can't optimize that. They can give them healthier food, but, like, 9,000 calories is what it takes to get. Okay, so if you think about, if you're an average person and you overeat for 5 years, you start to become overweight. You might be well on your way to becoming overweight at that point. Like, they have these athletes, they need these athletes to gain 100 pounds in what would take a normal person maybe 3 to 4 years of like a little excessive overeating to gain, but like they have to make them lose it fast because the season's in 4 months, or gain it fast because the season's in 4 months. Right. Like, I think that is the reason why it will always be this way.
Yeah, I think so.
You sign with the team, or it's summer camp, and they need you to gain 50 pounds by fall season. That's why it's got to be that disgusting, is they're packing the food in so they can gain this weight because they only have them for so much time.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, you know what?
That's the problem.
You know what? Because when they go home, they're not with a dietitian during summer break.
Right. They pack in all these food disorders in this short amount of time, and then they send them off. And
exactly. And you know what else, too? And I actually dealt with this a little bit with when I was in the police academy, because we were burning thousands and thousands of calories a day, thousands. Mm-hmm. So I would go home just like so hungry and whatever I could eat. Well, then when you stop burning thousands and thousands of calories a day, your eating habits stay the same. Right. Then you've got a problem. So like these college athletes they burn anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 calories a day, which is a ton. So it's almost maintenance just to have 9,000 calories. Right. Yep. But once you're not doing that anymore, then you have to learn how to eat, a fraction of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
You know, remember Michael Phelps had to eat 10,000 calories a day when he was training for the Olympics? Do you ever hear that?
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's a lot of chicken.
Yeah. But, what would
couldn't have been high fat stuff either, because he needs to be lean. Yeah. And
what would it have had to be to get him to gain 100 pounds in an off season, or 50 pounds in an off season?
Yeah.
Like that's what they're putting these kids through in college football.
Which, like, long term, if you're doing something for 20 something years, then okay. But like if you're a Division II or Division
your career is
lineman,
this long,
you
need to gain weight fast.
Years, and then you're out in the workplace and eating all the time, because that's what you're used to doing. Yeah, it's definitely.
I think it's wild. Let's
see, Michael Phelps burning a day. How many calories
did he burn in a day?
Between 8,000 and 10,000.
Had to be at least, if he's eating 10,000, had to be at least 10,000.
That is absolutely nuts, man.
But see, he would have had to eat, for him to, and he'd be like closer to 12, 13, 14,000 calories if he was trying to gain weight.
Exactly.
These kids, they're putting them through 5,000 calorie days, and then they still need them to gain weight. So they're giving them 5,000 calories to gain weight fast.
Yeah. I wonder if it's all monitored. Do you think they have like heart rate monitors and everything on them? Oh, it's just so unhealthy.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I've never
it's
was
kind
a
of
Division I athlete.
I guess.
But
like at some point, yeah.
What are the long-term? Are there long-term studies on the effects of making athletes gain weight over a 3-year period of time?
I don't know.
Rapid weight gain. For football,
is it disproportionately higher than the public? Yeah.
My goodness.
It's got to be, but the way the trending for public is going,
I think that people don't realize, like, weight gain is a bit of a slow process. Like you don't gain weight overnight. You might gain a quarter of a pound overnight or a tenth of a pound overnight. But like to gain 100 pounds and become overweight, like to the point where like, oh, wow, like that's obese. But like it takes a little while to gain 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Like that does not happen overnight.
Yeah. There's floors too.
I would think it takes it takes longer than a year. Like I don't want to say because I don't know exactly.
To gain how much?
100 pounds takes forever to gain.
Oh my goodness! What kind of stress on your heart?
100
pounds in a year?
Yeah, it takes a long time. But for these athletes,
I would love to dive into the numbers on that.
Yeah. I need to figure that out before. I used to think that this is how I'll put it. I used to think that weight gain for muscle and weight gain with fat were drastically different. Like, oh, you gain fat so much faster than muscle. Muscle takes forever, and fat happens overnight. They're like pretty close.
Are they really?
Like fat, yeah, you gain weight with fat much. Like you do gain weight with fat faster. But like the myth that it happens overnight is just not true. Like it takes a long time to gain a lot of weight. Almost like as long as it takes to lose it. That's kind of how I started thinking about it. Was like it takes as long. It's not. If you eat in excess 5,000 calories a day, you will gain weight very fast. If you then lose that same weight in a 500 calorie deficit, of course you're going to lose the weight a lot slower than you gained it. But if you equalize it, they happen the same.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
If you eat in a 500 calorie surplus, you will gain
the same amount of weight as you would if you.
It'll take you the same amount of time to gain it as if you do the same thing to lose it. Like fat gain is not like a very fast process. It does take a lot of time. It could take a year to gain 20 pounds, like a whole year.
Yeah.
Depending on how much of a surplus you're in.
Yeah. Especially different body types, different. Yeah. I mean that all.
That's where
some
it gets
people
a little hairy.
like when we had Evan Jennings in here, and we were kind of talking about, and my cousin Matt Zehr.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know about that. That I would love. That is a topic I would love to dive into.
They grow muscle real fast, it feels like.
It seems like it, but it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
So I would love to know more about that. Like I'm not very knowledgeable on why it seems that some people have that experience.
Some people can gain muscle faster than others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's just diligence, and like you think too, like a lot of people who weight train aren't doing, I've seen some who weight train for years and they're like, what's protein? Like, what do you mean what's protein? Like, what's creatine? What's
right. Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're just diligent with their stack.
It really is no different than like why some people have genetic physiques that could like win them a Mr. Olympia. Like it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. Right.
Right.
Like obviously they work really hard, but like,
and they're all on steroids.
We know that but we know that not everybody could do that.
Right. But so if everybody's on steroids and their physiques are still different, then
there's got to be something there.
Something in your
maybe it's
code.
Not that's getting out of the calories in, calories out world and into like some kind of weird genetics thing that I don't know about. So.
Yeah. The other thing that we'll touch on for his episode is that he lost a brother when he must have been, I don't remember their age difference, but he lost a brother in a car accident when his brother was 20. That shook the whole family, shook him. I really liked though his perspective on how he was able to connect with him. His brother's death kind of lit a fire under him a little bit. To be a little more diligent with his studies, a little bit more hardworking, a little bit more aggressive toward life, I guess. Maybe it's just the appreciation of the frailty in life, and it can be taken away from you so fast. But how he was able to connect kind of with him through that higher achievement. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, maybe kind of grew you up a little bit, forces you to grow up a little bit.
Yeah, especially when you're the second born. Especially when you're the second born and the oldest dies, because now you're the oldest.
Takes you out of that role and puts you into a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's interesting. Yeah, hard stuff like that is just, I don't know if you can really prepare for that too well. Kind of going back to my grandpa's episode in 34. It's like, having a stillborn child, like what prepares you for that?
Right.
And how do you deal with it, and how do you move on? And the heavy stuff. But I thought his perspective on all of that was really good. He's like, I needed to step up for my sisters. I needed to step up for my family and be strong for them. And it's good. There's good messages in there.
Mm-hmm.
He talked a little bit about fast pitch softball too. Walked us through a championship winning walk-off home run.
Yep.
But really, really fun conversation that was. And I hope that you guys will check that out. 36, take it away.
36, we had Bob Chamberlain on. I've known Bob for quite a few years, since early high school, mid-high school years. Interesting man, like great to have on a show and just get him talking. He's to me, he's just always been been a lot of places in life, seen a lot of things, and done a lot of things. And so that was really exciting for me to have him in and open him up, because he's very busy. And it's hard to get him in a room where you can kind of be focused on talking like, okay, now we're going to talk about you. He was my first employer. He was my high school science teacher. He was an employer again at one point. And then just a member of the community. Most important. So yeah, that was really great. Personally for me, I was excited about that one just because the way that I know him, to be able to sit down and go into detail about his perspective on things and his experiences. I just find that stuff super interesting in general. But yeah, he's an entrepreneur first. He's a family man and a man of God first, but he's an entrepreneur first in the not important things in life. And just an interesting mind and his perspective on how he's chosen his trajectory at different points in his life is very interesting. Very relaxed. If you are somebody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, likes business, or honestly, just if you're at a point in your life where you need if you have struggle making decisions, Bob's perspective on that is very interesting. What did he say? He put it a very specific way. Like when he had a choice to make, it was about when he was leaving his teaching career, at 19 years. His 20th would have put him at the New York State retirement, first level retirement or whatever. I don't know how that all works, but he left to start a business. And we asked him, was that hard? And he was like, what did he say? He was like, not really. It just was time, or he knew it was now or never.
I don't know how you do that.
Just
1 year and
easy,
you're kind of vested and set.
I don't know that we got into detail about okay, but was the decision super easy?
Yeah.
We didn't really ask him that specifically, but it felt like
it was okay.
Yeah, he just did it.
Because the lady, when he called, remember, he called somebody the pension board or something to let them know, and they're like, "Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
You think that's a good decision?"
Yeah.
And she was really concerned about him, but he kind of seemed like,
just whatever the next thing in life is, just tackle it with as long as you tackle it with vigor and enthusiasm, it's never a wrong decision. And then also one thing we kind of touched on a little bit, but I think was a big part of the episode, was having a spouse that can support you through all of that craziness. Not everyone's life goes one way. Not everyone has the trajectory of 30-year career job, stable income, stable family life, never, not a lot of change. Kids grow up, everyone's happy, everyone's stable. Not everyone has that trajectory. Some people are going to do a lot of things in their life. They're going to uproot their family. They're going to, whether it's literally or emotionally, these are, when you live the kind of life where you're doing the next thing that God tells you, there's a bit of emotional uprooting that happens in your family too, especially for your spouse. And he said, he talked a lot about, to his wife's credit, she was always on board to try the next thing, and how much that meant to him. Which Bob is an important member of the community for men. I know he's hosted a lot of young men's get-togethers and stuff, and I know personally that he cares a lot about investing in young men. So from my perspective, I don't know a lot about Bob and his marriage. He's like a man's man to me. So to hear him talk about, even for him, the support of his wife was an important part of basically their entire life and how they made decisions and the trajectory their life took was really cool. And so even for you manly men out there, don't discount how important including your spouse in on these decisions and valuing their support when big changes in your life come, job-wise, career-wise, whatever. And yeah, spouses too, you know, and I'm sure I know that Ellen ran an alpaca farm for quite a few years. So that's pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm sure there were times where Bob had to be like, all right, I'm going to support you in your thing. So it goes both ways. So don't discount the importance of including your wife and valuing their support, and then don't discount you returning the favor. It was really cool to hear him talk about that. So I like that episode a lot. Yeah. Great teacher too. Like, side note, to his credit, like physics, he made physics easy. So yeah, just a gifted guy. Like,
yeah, if you can make physics easy, you're a special person.
Yeah, he super smart, very gifted, great to talk to. Definitely want to check that one out.
A key takeaway for me was being okay with jumping around in careers. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times, especially leaving at 19 years when you're vested and get the top tier benefits after 20 years. Just leaving and starting a new venture is pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. I did have the thought afterwards, because his parents would have been, I don't know if they're still around, I can't remember, but his parents would have been part of like the silent generation.
Right.
And they were like go to the same job, be happy and grateful for that for 30 years. Yeah. And that's not how he is. He's just like, I kind of go where the wind takes me and make the best of that. He's done sales. He's done traveling. He's done all kinds of things. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah. But that it's okay. You don't have to just stay in one seat for decades and then get your pension right off and then that's it. Yeah. Like you can take some adventure. You can follow your passions. He kind of also alluded to the fact that like after a little while, he kind of gets like a little stir crazy, like with what he's doing, and kind of wants to go and do something else, and then just goes and does it. Yeah. Pretty important. So yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. It's a good lesson on like, you can't whitewash the generations before you either. Like everyone's so different, and you know, Bob loved to pursue different things and didn't want that one path, that one trajectory. Whereas, you know, other people in that generation might value, you hold a job down, this is what you do to support your family. You don't do risk, you don't do change. Like everyone's so different. And like Bob's a great example of that.
Yep. And to the older generation's credit, like back then you can't take change. Mm-hmm. Like your hierarchy of needs are dependent on stability and structure and having a steady income coming in, like post or during the Great Depression, post-Depression. It's like the mindset is find something that brings you stability and safety for your family so that you can provide consistently. And like if you can't do that, then taking risk is not an option. Right. You know? Yeah. So if you're in the 1930s and 1920s, you're not like, I'm just going to go start a new capital venture. Your kids are already
I'm going to put our last $10,000 in a fence company.
Exactly. Yep. So really great episode. I love talking to him. And then he kind of casually threw in there at the end. He went on like a 400 and something mile bike ride.
Oh, right.
Like an ultra bike ride. Yeah. So like, so what do you do for fun? No, I'm just a ultra athlete. So.
Ultra bike-a-thoner.
Yep. Really great episode. Check that one out. That was a lot of fun. So,
yeah. Episode 37 was Brock Roggie.
Hey, who's that guy? He sounds awesome.
We had touched on Brock's policing career early on in the podcast. We had plans to do an episode separate on focusing just on his experience in his policing career. So that was episode 37. Really, really good. If you're just interested on the inside scoop on what I wouldn't say an average policing career, but an exceptional policing career looks like, that one's a must listen. Yeah, I don't know how do I describe that? Some podcasts are just a general listen conversation wise, and some podcasts are like, oh, this is what it's like in that person's job, and like they give details and stuff. That was this podcast. Like you went into really cool detail about day-to-day stuff that most people might not know about. And so like if you just want to hear what a policing career looks like and what it feels like, the emotional side of it, the physical side of it. And that's is interesting to you. This one is like a great episode. It was super interesting to me. I felt like by the end of it, I had a policing career myself. Like that's how much detail we went into. Like I was like, oh, it's like, is the real inside scoop on like what a policing career looks like. And that's really cool. We also talked about the more serious stuff, like, why you decided to leave, the political climate of the country, how it impacted policing. So that is a whole separate subject that's just as fascinating. Yeah, that was just one of my favorite ones, honestly. I could talk about this stuff all the time. Yeah, wow. It's just super interesting.
I am honored.
Super interesting.
I hope that I did a decent job kind of explaining some of that stuff. But with most things, I try to see both sides. So it's very easy for law enforcement to get blinders and just immediately jump to defending law enforcement no matter what. And that's kind of a slippery slope. Kind of bridging that with where the disconnect is with the public is kind of important to me. Just being in it, when you're in it every single day, and then, through social media now and through the news now, you can kind of see what people are saying and how people are reacting to things that you have expertise on, and maybe how disconnected that correlation is. I'm really just kind of interested in trying to figure out a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I personally think that you're an excellent ambassador for that. So you speak highly of the profession while adding nuance to the criticisms and legitimacy where it's maybe needed, and without putting down the work itself. Like, do a great job. It's like anything else in life. Yeah,
it's a very difficult job, and I think that's part of that people kind of have a cursory knowledge of, and they'll say like, yeah, I understand it's difficult, but once you're in it, you understand that there's different levels to that and how much harder it can be. But at the end of the day, that they're humans, and humans make mistakes all the time, and humans have their own problems, and humans are broken. Humans have stresses in their lives and make bad decisions all the time. And if we could look at it a little bit more through that lens, on both sides of it, then I think that would be beneficial. Yeah. Especially too for law enforcement to be more understanding of who they're dealing with. It's easy to get jaded. It's easy to get stressed out. It's easy to get, in the mundane routine of call to call or whatever, without really having empathy for what people are going through. I think there's a balance on all sides.
Yeah. You can armchair quarterback your favorite sport that you like to watch, but like you can't armchair quarterback an issue like policing. It's too serious. There's too much at stake. There's too much you don't know. Like serious discourse from quality ambassadors, I think, is the solution. And I think you did a great job.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Episode 38. Marc Bellofiore is my father-in-law. That was,
AKA Marc the Man.
Yeah, no kidding. We have had. It's funny when you're running a podcast. Everybody has different opinions about how long they should go, and is 3 hours too long? Is 2 hours good? Is 1 hour too short? And we
start your own podcast.
You can start your own podcast and call it the 45-minute podcast.
And you can listen to yourself talk.
Interestingly enough, this one and the next one that we're going to talk about, we've had comments from many people who were like, I could have listened to a couple more hours of that.
Longer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was already 2 hours as it was, both of them. So interesting. Really, really great episode. It was really fun to get to know him a little bit deeper.
The description for this one is great. Taking a spiked volleyball to the face from someone special.
Yeah, why don't you take it away?
Because
you're a little bit more on the outside.
Marc is, yeah, I didn't know anything about him. Like, I know who he is. Like, could sit in a room and talk to him, but I don't know much about his life in detail. And so he had kind of like a little bit like Bob. Like he had few different things, few different smaller journeys in his life that led to some bigger journeys, and fascinating. Like when he was telling his story, it just reminded me of like an old school like career, like started out door-to-door sales, built like, working to the next thing. And now he's, management at one of the largest defense contractors in the world. Like just a very like movie-like career trajectory. I just found it fascinating listening to him describe. He's very colorful in the way that he described his life. So it was like just from a storytelling perspective, it was just like very interesting just from a storytelling perspective. Like he could probably tell, he could probably talk about lots of things in his life. It wasn't so much like the content as the way that he told the story, which is what I think made it such a great episode. From, what was he selling? He was selling, wire harnesses and stuff like that. Door to door, like literally driving the car to random businesses and seeing if they needed their product that he was trying to sell. How he overcoming obstacles for people who didn't want to talk to him, then hitting their dog with his car, and like just super super colorful storyteller, like just fascinating to then running his father's company successfully at 26 years old. Yeah, which I found like made me feel super inadequate. Like, what am I doing with my life? We didn't go into great detail about why he ended up leaving that business venture, but mostly, China taking over manufacturing stuff, which I could have gone in for a couple hours on, but we didn't go super into detail on that. To then, how was it that he went from, how did he say he found Lockheed Martin or Sikorsky?
He had gotten a job with somebody else that he really liked working for. Yeah. And somebody at a party had asked him if he would be interested in working for Sikorsky. Right. And he was like, nah. And then his wife like kicked him in the shin.
That's right.
That's right. I took that as a subtle hint.
Yeah. Just like when opportunity knocks, like, yeah, I don't know how many people are willing to do door-to-door sales, but like Marc being an exceptional human being, willing to do that takes a lot of humbling yourself, takes a lot of pushing aside fear of rejection. When, I think I find it extremely admirable, the entire first part of his journey that involved driving in his car, trying to sell things to people that didn't know him, didn't ask for him. I don't understand how people do that, but like he did what he had to do to make money for his family. And his is a story of when opportunity knocks, listen and pursue. And sometimes your wife needs to kick you in the butt and remind you to do that. But yeah very interesting. He's a career guy. The other thing that I appreciate a lot about that episode is if you are into management, or you're a manager, you're in a management position, or you just like leading people, I really appreciate his views on high quality management, especially because he does work for a typical publicly traded corporation where you feel like, that nowadays there's like a stigma against big companies. And he speaks very highly of the company that he works for, which is refreshing. And number two, that part of the stigma with big companies nowadays is that you don't value your job, they value you. And if they don't, you can just pack up and leave, and you are the important part of the puzzle, not them. And Marc is like the opposite of that. Like Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin are just as important to him as he is to them. And like, you do not hear that these days. And because that's the way he feels, he's proud of the company that he works for. His management style is, I think it reflects in his management style. And so all of that kind of being an introduction to what I appreciate about him is that he values the people that he works with, and he has a very atypical management style. You hear a lot of about a lot of toxicity in those environments, especially when it comes to management lower level relationship. But that's not Marc, and that's not the people that work for him. And it's because he doesn't buy into the toxicity. He buys into quality corporate culture, and hearing him talk about his little methods and how he handles situations, like how any good person would want to be a manager. Like, that's Marc. He tries really hard to be good at his job and to care about people. And you don't hear about that a lot in corporate culture. And so that was really refreshing. And also, like, I would want to do, like, I liked I would employ some of the things that he talked about, which I think is an even bigger testament. So I won't go into much more detail on that. You have to listen to the episode if you want to know what I'm talking about. But really refreshing ideas on management and how to treat people in management.
Yep.
Which I thought was really cool.
I liked a lot of, him and I are similar in a lot of ways, which is kind of funny that, and Stephanie jokes about it all the time. But he lost his father when he was 26.
That's right.
That's a tough thing to go through, especially when you had been working beside him for 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of learning the business, and then very unexpectedly passes away.
Yep.
And now it's on you to run the business. Mm-hmm. I really appreciated the way that he talked about his dad, kind of like my grandpa talked about his dad in episode 34. In this episode, he talked about his dad as Superman. Like, that's the only way they saw him. And it just kind of is a good reminder of how quickly things can be taken away and how important your lasting impact is through your kids. Mm-hmm. We're fathers, so, taking every moment very seriously because you don't know which one's going to be your last. I think that's a really valuable lesson, and most people need to hear that. Most fathers need to hear that. Mm-hmm. You want to be that in your son's eyes, that in your daughter's eyes. You want to be present, be active, and set an example. Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly what he was talking about there. And I know from talking to my wife, that's how she sees her dad. Mm-hmm. So, it's a generational thing. It's a powerful thing. It's maybe one of the most powerful things you can do. And he's very diligent about being a good father, and that's shown in his life and shown in his kids' lives. He also talked a lot. I loved exactly what you said, a lot about his leadership style, working for a big company like that. Mm-hmm. Really wonderful episode. I feel like that's going to be a great thing for generations to come, and no matter what happens in life, we'll have that. Mm-hmm. So it's important to check that one out. That's episode 38, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 38. Just a really good episode. I've actually listened to it several times. So, yeah. Anyway, cool. But yeah, go to the next one.
39 was Dr. Sean Harney. To us, he's Sean, Mr. Harney. But to people who don't know him, he's been a doctor for 30 years. Close to 30 years. He is been a member of the community here in Lewis County for over 30 years. He family friend and super interesting life. Another one of that generation where life was often more hardship. And he this had to be. I think this might be up there with one of my favorite episodes. The way that he spoke about his upbringing and his relationship with his parents, I think, it gave us an accurate or an interesting glimpse into what life might have been like before the generation of gentle love. I won't say coddling, but gentle parenting is what we call it nowadays. It seemed in the episode, I gathered that is not at all, that was not his experience from, when his parents dropped him off at school and said sayonara and left, to when he came home from school because he did not have any money left to pay for school. And his father turned him right back around, drove him back to school, dropped him off and said, "You're not quitting. Peace." We do not parent that way these days. We do not. Nowadays, what that would look like is my kid comes home, says he's broke, which probably nowadays that would never even happen in the first place because parents are paying for kids' schools, whatever. I don't know, however it works. But say he comes, you put them in the car, you give them your car, you give them $10,000 and say, "Here you go, sweetie. You can withdraw." Do you know how many times in school So I worked at a place in college, a restaurant, and we had an ATM at the restaurant so that people could come in and get cash out of the ATM. So many times kids would come in and I would overhear, I don't know if I would overhear it or I don't know the details of how I would just like know, but like how often it was mommy and daddy's money being withdrawn out of the ATM.
Interesting. Yep.
Like blew my mind. Like we're just a different generation, and hearing him talk about that tough love, like dad drops him off at college and says, I don't care that you don't have the money. You are not quitting. Go figure it out. Like didn't write him a check, didn't, cry with him, didn't pat him on the back, like drove him back to school and said, you're not quitting, figure it out. Go make your money, figure out how to pay for it. Like that's just a tough love that like we don't see often these days.
Yeah.
And like I know that was probably I'm sure that is a tougher way of being brought up, but I think that there's value to hearing overcoming hardship, and having parents that sometimes tough love works, even if it's not the most pleasant for either party involved.
Yep. Right.
I do wonder if the tide has shifted a bit. Like nowadays that would be very difficult for both parties. Like as the parent having to do that, as the kid having to receive it, both hard. Like I wonder the further you go back, like how tough was tough love? I don't know. We'll never know. But like, has parenting changed because of empathy, or has it changed because of sympathy? Like, did parents who used tough love a generation before us that we'll never relate to because we don't parent that way, did it lack sympathy but still have empathy, or was it this is just the way we do things and get over it? Like, was there no empathy? Was there no sympathy? Nowadays, I feel like we act out of sympathy, which is bad. And I wonder if there was still empathy, because my father had a little bit of a similar upbringing from what I've, just hearing him talk about his childhood, much more disciplinarian than I was raised. And so it's something that I've thought about for many years, is like, I wonder if my grandfather understood what he was doing and it was purposeful. It was purposeful. Or did it lack empathy and it was just the way things were done? And we didn't go into a ton of detail with Sean about the relationship between him and his father, but I still think that it's something to appreciate, this concept of tough love. And that was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
We just don't see a lot of that these days.
I think it was interesting too, that the reason that do you remember the reason why he ran out of money? Remember what happened there? So he had been working the entire summer before that to try to afford his college.
Yep.
The company, or the farmer that he had worked for, went bankrupt.
Not his fault.
Not his fault.
He got screwed.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
And so did the farmer.
Yep.
Right. Wasn't able to pay him. He could have just packed it all up and been like, I'm not pursuing this anymore.
Right.
And decided to still go, and then until he ran out of money, and then was like, I can't be here anymore.
Right.
So went home, got a bus ticket. He said he had $20 in his bank account. $20 bus ride back home. The next day, his dad put him on the bus.
Sent him back. That's right. Sent him back. And
off.
Yeah.
You're not going to quit. Go figure it out. I love that.
Yeah. What's even greater about that
he probably
story?
didn't love that at the time.
Probably not. Yeah.
It's tough.
What's even greater about that story, though, is that he did. Like,
then you look at him now.
He listened to his father.
Yeah.
Like,
right, he didn't have to.
That's a big part of the story.
Sure.
Like, he listened to his father.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then he, went to med school, was in the Air Force. I liked talking the beginning about when he was talking about the World War II vet.
Yeah.
And like downloading his knowledge from firsthand experience, island hopping in the Pacific. Oh, I could have gone for like an hour on just that.
Yeah. He said he wasn't super into military history, and then completely contradicted himself.
Yeah.
It was
He was going into details about planes and islands and landing maneuvers, and that's so cool. Yeah. I love people that are so knowledgeable about things and don't think they are.
Yeah. Like
especially compared to me.
Humility in their interests. It's like, no, you know exactly what you're talking about.
That's never happened to me. Yeah. Also, pretty much a lacrosse stud.
Yeah.
Sounds like had D1 offers and just kind of by happenstance his family had moved out of Long Island to Pennsylvania, and where he had went to school didn't have a lacrosse team.
Yeah.
And then when he went to college, the lacrosse team folded. Right. Because he was going to go to D3. He wanted to play. Yep. He wanted to play, that it folded. It's just like
all the doors opening up.
Door shut.
Yeah.
Door
After
shut.
Door shutting. Yeah.
Door shut.
Yep.
And he said, looking back at it now, was like, that was facilitating my future, and I just didn't know it at the time.
Right.
And how hard that would have been to have a part of your identity just being taken away from you at every turn, so that you could actually turn to a bigger part of your identity and then move forward. Pretty fascinating. Yeah. But then went to medical school and decided afterwards that they were going to move up here for a bunch of different reasons, for raising a family on a farm, for the culture here, for the hospital staff here, a lot of really good stuff. Yep. And it needs to be said too, like we're talking about an emergency room doctor for 20 years and then an administrator, like a chief medical officer. We didn't even get into that too much. Right. But all of that wouldn't have ever happened if maybe he pursued lacrosse.
Right.
Or, whatever. So just wonderful story and so easygoing, such an easy flowing conversation. Yeah. Felt like we could have just gone on and on. Yeah. And then toward the end, we kind of started getting into value and parenting and seeking truth. And then the episode ended.
Right. So part 2 coming at some point.
Part 2 has to be coming for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, one thing that you have to realize about him is he's an extremely thoughtful person. Quiet individual, but like super thoughtful. And when it comes out, it's like, you better be listening.
Yep.
Yeah. Like he's a good man. And it was really, did I say that this is one of my favorites? Yeah. Yeah. This is one of my favorites. Like might be my favorite. I had a really good time talking to him, and I thought it was just excellent.
Yeah. And this was another one that people were like, I could have listened for another couple hours. Yeah. And it was already 2 hours to begin with. Yeah. And so we're definitely going to be having him on if he'll come on again. So, really fun conversation. Episode 40 was the most recent one before this one. Christian Zehr. You know this story a little bit better than I do, so why don't you just go ahead and take it?
Yeah, Christian, another family friend. He's a better spokesman for himself and his story, and his story kind of speaks for itself. So I won't say too much on the story, but you've known Christian pretty much your whole life, right? Since you can remember. I've known Christian for 5-6 years. One of my best friends. When we get together again, I'm always so glad to see him. I keep a small circle, and like Christian has been a good friend of quite a few years. And I just think that his story is a testament to God's pursuing of people, of those who, even if they never knew him, he wants them to know him. And Christian knew God. His parents were believers, and were very intentional in raising their children that way. And Christian's story is basically a very similar prodigal son type thing. And he came on to tell for the first time that story. He had never really publicly talked about recovering, more specifically about recovering from his past issues. And knowing, if you know Christian well, you know that is the part that he would maybe have been a little more nervous to talk about. He doesn't have nearly the same reservations about talking about the past and the struggles. He has more, he was more nervous to speak about the recovery from it because he knows many people in his life, and because he's still human, he knows that people that, from that past life may hear this, and he loves people enough to not want to push people away. So what I found interesting was just that he, being more nervous to talk about the recovery and less about the past, is what had kind of, I don't know if it kept him from talking about it. I don't know how many opportunities he had before we approached him to talk about it. But I feel and I told him right at the beginning that I feel very honored to that he shared that for the first time publicly on our platform. So Christians is a story of redemption, of struggle and redemption, and finding his way back to Christ, and probably in my life maybe the biggest rebound. He's got an incredible story. Fell pretty hard, and the Lord drew him back, and he listened. And that's all I'll say about the story. You kind of have to go listen to it. We originally were going to have him on to talk about his 3-month trip to Israel that he just took. But I think given the opportunity to have a platform, he felt brave enough to speak up and say, I don't know that I can tell that story without talking about how I got there first. And so that was kind of the birth of this episode. So next time we'll talk about his experiences in Israel, because he's very descriptive. He's very deep. Christian is a deep person. And he would not go to Israel and not take it all in. And so I'm excited to talk about, what he experienced, what he saw in Israel, because if you don't want to talk to, he's not a boring person by any means. If you want to hear about the majesty and the glory of the birthplace of our Lord and Savior, you want to hear it from somebody like Christian. So we'll have him on next time to talk about that. But super good episode 40.
Yeah, I feel like you wrapped that up really nice. I never knew the depths of the struggle. I knew what he was struggling with, but to what degree and how that kind of manifested into other problems. One part that I really loved about that episode was talking about purpose and mission and passion, and how there's something unique to men that needs that drive, that needs that purpose, that needs the call to adventure. And I really loved the way that he talked about that when he was in college, he didn't have that. And then that kind of slipped him into this other lifestyle and other struggles, and how he thinks that a lot of it stemmed from that. And I really think that that's the case for most young men. I think that most young men are adrift. I don't think they have a purpose for their life. They do have a purpose for their life, but in their minds, they haven't thought about it to make it realize it, to make it manifest. So I really appreciated that perspective. And I think that young men should be able to look at that story and say, how to prepare my life for what I want to do, or how to prepare myself so that I'm strong enough that I can go through hard things and then find out what I want to do. A lot of the people that we talked about in this block of episodes, that's their life story. Like if you look at Bobby Chamberlain, if you look at Sean Harney, if you look at Marc Bellofiore, they didn't have like cookie cutter easy lives. They had struggles and movement and unpredictability. It's very easy to just fall into all of these different struggles. And Christian, just seeing the progression and work back and the healing and the community's response and how impactful that was in his journey so far, so encouraging. Yeah. So great. And people need to...
Everybody needs to listen to that, because everybody falls. And we all need redemption in the same way that Christian found it. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so, but that's just the bare bones of that episode. You have to listen to that if you're interested in a good redemption story. So
100.
Other than that, I mean, this is going to be 41. I'm pretty excited about, some of the ones that we've got lined up here.
Yeah.
It's going to be super fun, especially for the next one. Been looking forward to that one for a while.
Yeah. Can we tease it?
We can tease it. How do you going to tease it?
This one will be coming out in not next week, but in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, this will be released on a Monday, though, so it'll be the following Monday. So if you're listening to this on Monday when it's released, next Monday.
Yep. We're going to have, oh, man, what's his rank?
I don't know. It's high.
I wanted to call him by rank. We're going to have Paul Puddington on, local homeboy, turned Coast Guard member. Officer, yep. So we're going to have him on, and I don't know what experience we're going to pick, but we're going to talk about something.
Yeah, I have no idea where it's going to go. I think it's just going to be a conversation to have fun with.
Yeah,
and
so
talk about experiences. If you're interested in learning these kinds of experiences, let us know. We're kind of seeking out a lot of people that we want to listen to and talk to, but also that have super impactful insight on life, parenting, business, unique experience, redemption, struggles, how to get through things, how to be stronger, how to be a better man, how to be a better father, how to be a better husband, all of these things, at least for us. And then how to lead your family, how to grow in your faith. All of these things, good stuff.
Right on.
But yeah, we're excited to have Paul on. I actually can't wait for that one.
It'll be a good one.
It'll be fun. But that's a wrap. That's a wrap up.
You got 7 episodes to catch up on. So
yes, and just a disclaimer again. I'll look right at the camera. It's not an excuse not to check those episodes out just because you heard the recap. The truth is, we're like tip of the iceberg on these.
Yeah,
having 10, 15 minutes to recap a 2-hour episode just doesn't do it justice.
You got to hear it. You got to have to listen to the people speak too. It's not the same. So give you a little summary of what might interest you and then dive in. Yep.
And if there's something else that would interest you, you can leave us a comment. You can reach out to us and we're willing to listen to
Instagram, YouTube. Anything like
all the places. So, all right. Thanks, Nick, for being here. All right.
Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.